welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. I hope nothing seemed too out of the ordinary with the vacay. I'm sure the only thing that was noticeable was the fact that I didn't cover one big news story. And I'm gonna just say it, it's not covered in here either, because I don't think, from what I've seen, nothing has really come of it yet. Until something actually comes of it, then I don't really feel the need to cover it. Also, another housekeeping, I released a poll that, when this video comes out, I'll have released a poll asking again for future content. That's what I think I'll be using the community tab for a lot more, doing actual things to poll my audience and see what they want. The polling question is going to revolve around whether or not I cover a certain election. You see, there are some reasons why I should, some reasons why I shouldn't. One of the reasons that I said was, how can we trust this election when this election is going to be clearly rigged? But then I'm like, wait, but I covered the Nicaraguan election. So, another reason why it's a little hard to decide is because that election doesn't have a set date yet. So I don't know when I can put it in the video schedule. So I'm just going to leave it to you all, and you all figure out what happens next. But I will add the asterisk that if, it doesn't work with the schedule, then I still won't do it. But I'm basically trying to figure out a way where it would fit. But don't worry, I did add a new election to talk about in its stead. But unfortunately, that will leave Asia as the only continent not represented in the election thing. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. Speaking of elections, we're going to cover one of the elections I did cover already, but unfortunately, the results came in. The Finnish parliamentary election. Unfortunately, the predictions of the episode were pretty accurate. Lo and behold, the National Coalition won, Finns got second, and the SDP got third. Now, the results were actually rather close. The National Coalition got 48 seats, Finns got 46, and Shauna Marin got 43. So they was thinking, maybe there is still potential. But then you look at the coalition partners and you realize there's no way, because what happened was National Coalition got 10 seats, and Shauna Marin actually managed to get 3 more seats than last time. But the problem was her coalition lost a lot of seats. The center, the Greens, and the Left Alliance lost a grand total of 20 seats. And the biggest loser of the night has to be Power Belongs to the People, who lost a grand total of 100% of their seats. Now, all the parties still have to work together to try and form a coalition, and issues are already forming as the Center Party doesn't want to work with the Greens, but they also have stated they might be interested in working with other parties, and due to this loss, Shauna Marin made the announcement that she will be resigning as the head of the SDP. Very unfortunate, as, honestly, as I said before, her actual legislative career has actually been pretty good. In fact, literally right before the election happened, or literally right after the election happened, I think it was around the time period, right before the election, she actually got a massive W in the sense that Finland joined NATO, and many absolute idiots on the internet, i.e. Socialist MMA, made the stupid assumption that Finland's joining NATO is the reason why Shauna Marin lost her re-election bid, when that is literally the furthest thing from the truth, not helped by the fact that the National Coalition, the party that beat her, literally supports joining NATO. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure every single party in Finland at least softly agrees on joining NATO. The only party that I remember specifically that didn't like joining NATO was the Left Alliance, and they changed their stance after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So yeah, bit of an L, but we'll make it up with some W's later. Speaking of W's, now let's move on to Chicago, where we got a big W. Brandon Johnson managed to become mayor of Chicago. I will say that I was 100% right in guessing that he would win. I knew for a fact that Brandon Johnson was going to win. I really didn't see any path forward for Vallis. I wasn't right on one thing. For example, you may remember that I made a prediction that I didn't foresee any candidate publicly backing Vallis, with the exception of Willie Wilson and Lloyd Lightfoot. Lo and behold, Lloyd Lightfoot did not make an endorsement at all, and Willie Wilson, while he did support Paul Vallis, he was not alone in that endeavor. In fact, basically every candidate, with the exception of Chuy Garcia and Cam Buckner, decided to back Paul Vallis. And everybody was completely perplexed as to why all of these candidates were backing them. Well, okay, Willie Wilson was no, surprise. Okay, but he was only a half surprise because, ideologically he agreed with Vallis, but some people were wondering, would he endorse Johnson only because he's black? But the rest of the candidates in the field were running as progressives. Chuy Garcia, Jamal Green, Sophia King, Roderick Sawyer, and Cam Buckner, and of course Brandon Johnson, were all running as the progressive candidate. And I guess Lloyd Lightfoot was trying to run as the progressive candidate, but, it didn't really end up working for her. But considering all of these people were running as progressives, I naturally assumed that they would back the more progressive option should push come to shove. And for some reason, only 2 of them actually backed the progressive option. And it's funny, because literally every single one of them just really had no reason to do so. No, they actually did have a reason in doing so. They thought that Vallis was going to win, and they wanted to guarantee favors from him when he became mayor. I know some of the candidates are going to get really, really mad if you say that that's the reason, but that's literally the only reason why candidates make endorsements like that. Ones that go completely antithetical to their own ideals. And seeing the results of this race come in through graphics and stuff, it does show the very obvious divides that still remain in Chicago. Many people took maps from the Chicago mayoral race between Harold Washington and another person. I forget who the opponent was, but it was when it was just a 2-person race. And they showed the 2 races side by side, Brandon Johnson and Vallis, and Harold Washington, the other guy. And their races were exactly identical. All the areas that backed Johnson backed Washington. And coincidentally, both of those areas were the black parts of Chicago. Meanwhile, the other 2 were the white areas of Chicago. Although it was interesting looking at that analysis and then looking at the previous, results, because, oh boy, that's quite an interesting development. Because when you look at the actual results, it looks like the areas that are typically the black areas of Chicago, in the first round, they voted for Lloyd Lightfoot very easily. And in the first round, typically white areas voted for Chuy Garcia a lot. And the areas where Lloyd Lightfoot won were areas that Brandon Johnson won in the runoff. And Chuy Garcia, the places he won, Vallis won in the runoff. Which is actually interesting, because normally you would think, ideologically, that it would be flipped. But if I had to take a wild guess, I would say the areas that Chuy won were the areas with large Hispanic populations. That's just kind of a thing that happens. The only exception was in the first round. Apparently, Brandon Johnson won, white areas, or at least areas that had a large white population. Now, for most of the people who endorsed Vallis, who were progressives, it made somewhat sense, considering they were political figures and they wanted to get some political favors. But the one that everybody was so perplexed about was Jamal Green, because Jamal Green was the candidate that was painting himself as further left than everyone in the field. He was trying to paint himself as the furthest left candidate in the field, and he was making all of these big freaking excuses as to why he was endorsing Vallis, the pro-school choice, the pro-school privatization, pro-cop candidate. And he was literally going on this, he went on 15 different weird tirades that were just either objectively wrong or were completely misinterpreting what was being said. First, he went on this weird thing. I mentioned it when it happened, but he went on this weird rant where he was explaining how Johnson was actually a fake progressive. Ergo, he would endorse the conservative candidate in the race. And then when people called him out on it, he was accusing them of racism, saying, the white progressives are trying to ruin, the progressive movement, which he has stated before, but in a way that actually made somewhat sense. But this one made like zero sense because it's like the conclusion doesn't add with the like what you're saying. Like you're saying that Brandon Johnson is not to the left enough, but Wallace is to his right, so it makes no sense why you would be backing him. The closest policy-oriented thing was that Johnson was in favor of more taxes, but he was for taxing the rich, not for like the middle and lower class. And then another thing that he was saying was like, Brandon Johnson doesn't care about the black community. Interesting accusation to levy at Brandon Johnson. And it's kind of weird considering a candidate you supported and actively campaigned for faced very similar accusations of not caring about particular communities, but you were there to their defense. But in this case, no. Another one that was a big weird one was like, oh, the Chicago Teachers Union is backing him, and they don't spend money on actual teaching. They spend their money on political campaigning. Okay, that doesn't really make sense either. Like, okay, they spend money on political campaigns. Okay, and then he later criticized like, oh, Tony Preckwinkle is backing him, and it's like, okay, like, wait, how's that a bad thing? Like, she was the one running against Lori Lightfoot. It's weird. You backed Lori Lightfoot, so now all of a sudden it's really weird why, and you hate Lori Lightfoot now enough to like run against her, but for some reason, when a candidate who ran against Lori Lightfoot as well is like supporting a candidate who is not Lori Lightfoot, it's weird now. Things got even more weird when people like Bernie and Jesse Jackson started endorsing Brandon Johnson, and Jamal Green made some more idiotic statements. One of the big ones being that, oh, now that Jesse Jackson is supporting Brandon Johnson, now all of a sudden progressives like Jesse Jackson. When did y'all stop hating Jesse Jackson? To which everybody responded with, wait, when did they start hating Jesse Jackson? And many cited Bernie, like Bernie endorsing Jesse Jackson and then Jesse Jackson endorsing Bernie. Then he made some more idiotic statements about like, oh, how he was endorsing Wallace because Brandon Johnson's a faux progressive and that everybody was endorsing him for that reason. Which is like, no. Literally, he got the support of the Chicago Police Union and fucking Charlie Kirk. It makes no sense. But the one thing that made the absolute least sense was Jamal Green tried to use Malcolm X as a justification for him endorsing Paul Wallace, using sort of the language of like the white moderate, when again, it makes no sense for three reasons. One, I think that argument is a little flawed in and of itself. I understand the extent to what it's coming from and like what it means, but it's like sometimes it's like that's used to just hurt allies who you are claiming are like their enemies in sheep's clothing. Two, he doesn't say, and that is why you need to support the objectively worst person. Like Malcolm X doesn't say, oh, these white Democrats are just paying lip service to us, so what you need to do is support the segregationist Republicans. That's not what he said. He's saying, like, don't support either of them. And you're making the decision to support the actively worst decision. And three, biggest one, it all ties back. He would have said the exact same thing about Jamal Green for backing Bernie. And it was just so funny to see Johnson win and just see, like, Jamal Green literally burned every single bridge with the progressive community for literally nothing. He's literally not living this down, even though he has tried desperately to try and remove this from the equation. I went back to one of the old tweets that I replied to him with and saw that his tweet was gone. And if I had to take a wild guess, I would say a lot of his tweets involving Paul Wallace are just flat out gone. And it's just so hilarious to see. But anyways, moving on to the next story, just recently, a bombshell dropped. Clarence Thomas is now being pushed to be impeached because he was found out that he had actually taken many luxury vacations from a Republican megadonor for more than 20 years. Now, the reason why this is a bombshell is because Clarence Thomas never publicly disclosed any of these, even though as a government official, especially on the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be an apolitical or nonpartisan, I guess, branch of government, he's supposed to make it known when he does stuff like this. He tried to make the excuse saying, oh, well, I was told by other Supreme Court justices to not do this. But it's just a lazy excuse. Like, even if someone in the Supreme Court told him not to do it, it doesn't matter. He should have done it. He should have disclosed it. He shouldn't have taken those trips at all. You know, stuff like this is really why I, phooey the whole notion of, we need to depoliticize the Supreme Court. The real argument is we should departisan the Supreme Court, I guess. This is stuff that is just very open. Supreme Court justices have been floated as potential presidential candidates, including Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas was floated as a potential Republican candidate for president in 2012. The guy has been very open with his political leanings. Almost every justice does. The only thing of refraining of expressing their political opinions that they have done is explicitly endorse candidates. And, shocker, you're not seeing any Democratic Supreme Court justices being investigated like this. Because I would assume they don't do that stuff. Because for some reason, Democrats are held to an immensely higher standard than Republicans. Literally, Ruth Bader Ginsburg expressed one tiny political opinion about Donald Trump, and then everybody went ballistic over it. Meanwhile, Clarence Thomas has apparently been going on Republican cruises for 20 years, and nobody batted an eye. There's really not much to say except Clarence Thomas should not be in the Supreme Court anymore. Not even just because of this, but because nobody should be on the Supreme Court for more than 10 years. Anyway, speaking of people who will not be there for 10 years, the Tennessee GOP has decided to do something interesting. Due to the recent, mass shooting that happened, there was a protest in the Tennessee Senate chamber, and 3 of their lawmakers participated in that protest. And what ended up happening is the Tennessee GOP pushed for some bills to expel all 3 of them, but for some reason they couldn't do all 3. They had to vote on one at a time. I guess that's just to prevent someone from saying oh, we expel all the members of the Republican Party. And what ended up happening is 2 of them did get expelled, but 1 didn't. Justin Jones and Justin Pearson were expelled, and Gloria Johnson was not expelled. Now, one interesting thing I should mention is that Justin and Justin are both black, and Gloria is white. I wonder if those have any relation. Justin Jones was very explicit in some of his denunciations of this. One of the big things that he put out was that one of the members of the chamber at one point at a time was a convicted child molester, and nobody expelled him. But, of course, these 3 are being held to a higher standard. Again, now there's a whole lot of ins and outs about all this stuff, because some people are saying oh, this doesn't matter that much because they'll probably just run in a special election and then win their seats again. But then again, maybe the Tennessee GOP will try to block them from even taking their seats, because this has happened before in history. Not Norman Thomas. Victor L. Berger, he ran for Congress after losing his congressional seat, and then he won a seat back, and then when he was going to take his seat, they refused to seat him, and then when he tried to win, and then when he won again, they just refused to seat him again, and then just left the seat vacant. Tennessee GOP will probably do the exact same thing if they end up winning, or I guess when they end up winning, because I guarantee you that they'll run and win, because these are deep blue seats, and these 2 are pretty prominent people. Many people are worried if there's going to be copycat things like this. I don't know. Maybe there will, maybe they won't. But GOP is basically going full mask off. And, obvious things are obvious. Speaking of obvious things that are obvious, Montana decided to do a very interesting thing. The Montana Senate decided to pass a bill to create a top 2 jungle primary for Senate. It would make them the 5th state in the union to have a jungle primary, and the 4th of this variety. Alaska's is different because they have a top 4 system, not a top 2 system. They also have ranked choice voting. The other 4 are basically this system. Now, to those who are keen, they might remember that Montana has a Senate race in 2024, and that particular Senate race is a very close one. Incumbent John Tester won the race the first time by 4 points, and won his re-election bid by 4 points again. And while the Libertarians don't necessarily get, like, a decent amount of votes, usually only getting the margin, like, the Montana, like, GOP tries to push hard for the Libertarians to not be on the ballot, and the Montana Democrats push hard for the Greens to not be on the ballot, the latter usually being more successful. And many people trying to say, like, oh, they're just doing this so they can ruin John Tester's chance for re-election. A sentiment which I agree with, but you don't have to take my word for it. They literally say it in the bill, right here. Whereas the 2023 legislature proposes a top 2 primary for U.S. Senate in 2024 with a sunset provision to allow the 2025 legislature to review the election process and make revisions according to its constitutional authority and determine future applicability of the top 2 primary in Montana. The bill literally only has a top 2 system for the next election. That's it. And they don't even do it for the House race. It's only for the Senate race. Like, with the other ones, they at the very least, like, made it universal. Like, it was all around the board that these elections would happen. Not just the one that they want to win. Like, it passed the Montana Senate. I don't know how far it'll get further, if there is a chance to stop it. But Dems better be hoping for another W, otherwise this might be another thing to hurt their chances in the next election. Speaking of the next election, we have just gotten 2 new challengers. On the GOP side, Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, has announced that he is going to run for president in the Republican primary against Donald Trump. Now, for those of you who don't know who he is, that's basically all I can tell you. He was the former governor of Arkansas. He formally announced in an interview, but the campaign hasn't officially begun yet, because Asa is essentially trying to get any other Republican to run against Trump. Like, he's basically a stalking horse. Like, that's a political term. I finally used that term and I remembered what it was. A stalking horse is where one particular well, actually, it's not even necessarily used right, because it's usually if another candidate is pushing someone else to run just to see if momentum can be built for their own candidacy. Maybe somebody is, but I think Asa Hutchinson is essentially pitching himself as his own stalking horse for someone else. And I thought that he would be the only person that run in 2024 that I would talk about, but it turns out we actually got another challenger. This time, interestingly enough, on the Democratic side, Joe Biden's second major challenger is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an anti-vaccine activist and one of the Kennedys. He has formally signed a statement of candidacy, like on Wednesday, with the FEC, and is going to officially announce at some point in the future. This is going to be a crapshoot. The first thing I think most people need to say is that RFK Jr. has no shot at winning. Now, I've seen a lot of people try to do, like, the poo-poo of, like, him, like, oh, he's an anti-vaxxer, blah, 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 he has no chance, and, like, saying, like, oh, we're just gonna toss him aside. And I've even heard some people say, like, oh, see how the mainstream media will treat him with a lot of respect, but not treat Marianne Williamson with respect. But one thing that is pretty obvious to me, and I guess a couple of others, is that the anti-Biden vote is now going to get split. And they'll even go one step further and say the anti-vax vote is going to get split, because now they have to choose between Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And now I'm going to get a ton of people who, like, our Marianne Williamson stands are going to be like, no, don't be mean. Marianne Williamson is not anti-vax. There's no, like, parallels between her and RFK Jr. If you don't believe me, I have a very interesting task I want you to do. Go into the YouTube search bar, type in The Vanguard, enter, click the channel, go to their video where they talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Don't pay attention to what they have to say, but go into the comment section. Every single comment in that video are people saying how either Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. are on the same level to them, or that they're shifting their support from Marianne Williamson to RFK. Some of which even going a step further and saying that the vanguard shouldn't criticize RFK Jr. because he is the true anti-establishment candidate. And people who mock RFK Jr. in the comments are then in turn mocked by RFK supporters. The fact that we have people on the so-called left that are taking RFK Jr. seriously are very much why I'm making a future podcast. Hint at future podcast. It will be not the next one, but the one after that, I think. And the vanguard should not be too surprised at the fact that they have members of their audience that love RFK Jr. because they are supporting somebody who likes RFK Jr. Literally, they're the ones that are trying to dig up the whole Jesse Ventura 2020 thing and rebrand it as 2024 Ventura. But in 2020, Ventura stated that he wanted RFK Jr. to be his running mate. You guys have no one to blame but yourself. Man, with all this bashing I'm doing at the Vanguard, I should probably make the next one then, but no, I'm saving it for someone else. With that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. Oh boy, the title and thumbnail is definitely going to be interesting. Might catch a few eyeballs if you recognize a couple of those people. But let's just get into it. On September 24th, 2018, basically the year that I founded this channel and started producing content, I released my first podcast side series, Thoughts On, a show where I would talk about another YouTuber, political commentator, whatever, and give my thoughts on them, usually complemented with background, history on the figure in question, etc. And depending on my views, or if they're involved in any sort of drama, they can either be really in-depth or really short. But through the course of it, I've either gotten requests to do or felt compelled to make episodes on certain creators. In fact, I actually have a wheel on the website Wheel Decide that I bookmarked that has basically every creator that I'm interested at least a tiny bit on talking about. But the wheel changes very frequently. As some people become relevant, irrelevant, they might get removed, some will get added. I think some have been added and removed, and I've never even literally looked at them. Here's an example. Early on, one of the people that was one of the first people that I added to the wheel was a YouTuber by the name of That Guy T. I would be genuinely surprised if any of you knew who he was without having to look him up first. But sometimes you get compelled to do something, but there's just something in you that just doesn't feel right doing it. Like, something just doesn't click. Like, when I make episodes of Thoughts Ons, something usually clicks. Like, there's like a catalyst for me to make them. I was gonna say at least nowadays, but now looking back, I'm realizing, there are some older episodes that I really did just make for the sake of, like, hopping on a trend. Not for, like, clout chasing, but, because the trend happened, and it's something that I felt I needed to talk about. The first one I can think of is Steven Crowder, because he just got into trouble with Carlos Maza and the Vox ad Plotacalypse happened, so I felt compelled to make an episode on him, and sure enough, it happened. Hunter Avalon, his episode was also involved with a catalyst, because it was like right around the time that he had shifted his political viewpoints, so I'm like, okay, so it's good to make a video on this now, so I can actually move forward and whatever. The Antunes controversy, because Antunes, for those who don't know who Antunes is, I have a thoughts on about him. He was this like racist cartoonist, and like there was a huge drama surrounding him, so I figured it makes sense to jump on that trend, maybe add political elements and whatever. Michael Brooks, the catalyst for that one, I've mentioned it in the episode that I made on him. I spun the wheel, and then when I spun the wheel, it landed on him, and it was the exact day that he died, so I'm like, that's definitely something that I should probably talk about. And Xander Hall, I did a video on him because he was going through his controversy at the time, so I was like, hey, I can make content on that, because it has political elements, I guess. Like, usually there's a catalyst, either creatively or otherwise, that makes me compelled to do an episode. But there are a lot of ones that I don't get that for. In fact, sometimes I might get an inclination to not do an episode at all. And then eventually when push comes to shove, some creators just disappear and, well, then there they go. And then one day when I was watching certain videos about certain creators, I was like, I really want to talk about them. But then it's like, I really don't. And I was like, I hated it with a burning passion that I was like, there was really no reason why I should be making a video on them. And then I was like, wait, maybe I can explain that. Maybe I can put together a list of some of the people that I really just cannot, for the life of me, make a video on and whatever. Especially considering there are a lot of elements with the thoughts on series that I've kind of been a bit controversial on. I've thought about, maybe I should just pull the plug on the thoughts on series, period, because does it just add to the controversy in regards to drama and stuff? Especially considering how people have turned this show into something this is how it is with creations. When I made the creations, when I first made Thoughts On, it was literally just me giving my thoughts on a creator. Oh, I think their ideology is trash. Or, oh, they make crappy videos. But now, thanks to certain people, now all of a sudden, the Thoughts On episodes have to be some deep analysis breakdown, cracking the code and debunking and whatever. They have turned into something that they weren't originally. And then certain other things happen, certain creators don't pop up in my radar, so I can't really do a Thoughts On them. And certain creators I just don't really feel like I should make a Thoughts On. So then I decided, hey, I'll make a video just saying that and count down at least 10 creators-ish that I won't make Thoughts ons. Now, the thing is, there were never any official rules in regards to Thoughts On. Basically, anybody who was considered a pundit or political YouTuber, I could make a video on. But as things go on, of course, it's where does the line get drawn? And does those lines factor into this video? Oh, do I not include any creators that don't make content anymore, period? Or do I sometimes want to make content on creators that don't make content anymore? Is it a multitude of factors as to why I won't make a video on certain people? Well, what I've decided to do is here are some categories as to why I wouldn't make a video on a certain person anymore, with some examples. Irrelevancy, Primo Nutmeg, and Political Juice, and That Guy T, as I mentioned before. Those are 3 prominent creators that, they just don't make content anymore. Primo Nutmeg, he just disappeared. I literally looked at his Twitter feed and stuff. He hasn't posted in a while. He might have posted again at this point, but he just disappeared. And, all of his YouTube content was just taken off, I think. Political Juice, similar story. He just disappeared. I should probably mention who he is. Primo Nutmeg was this, I guess, he pretended, he was one of those fake lefties. And Political Juice was this alt-right guy who was copying Salmonella and Grade A Under A. And I guess by this point, I should probably mention who That Guy T is. So you should have commented who you thought That Guy T is, or if you knew who he was. But I'll reveal who he is. He was some black libertarian creator who got into a huge controversy when he basically unironically endorsed fascism. When he first made a tweet, he was yeah, a libertarian fascism is friends, and then everybody debunked on him. And then he made a response video where he basically said, due to all of those people dunking on him, he now unironically believed that. The second factor, ideology. At one point, I did briefly consider just canceling all Thoughts Ons on right-wing figures, because right-wing creators are just not on my radar. So I can't really give a good in-depth analysis on their content. But of course, I can't really do that. If I'm gonna cancel right-wing Thoughts Ons, then I might as well just cancel Thoughts On in general. There are many dangerous reactionaries out there, and I can't just not talk about them, period. Especially considering, sadly, a lot of them are still incredibly relevant. And the last factor that I guess is there is try not to include people who I have a beef with them that's personal or drama related. Like Inkaino, John Munitz, Slow News Day, Though I guess technically I could make ones for them on ideological and broader drama reasons. But literally, like, it kind of, the only difference between him and me is that he was like, oh, I hate history, I guess. Like, he hated history and didn't understand, like, how far-right reactionary movements worked. And John Munitz, it was literally just, he said something blatantly incorrect. I tried to correct him, and then he got mad. There were other people that I could have included here, like Chris Richards or Samir Khan, but I technically could make videos about them about other broader things. Like, maybe I could make a video talking about how, like, Chris Richards is an accused sex pest, so it's like, that's a bit weary. Or I could make a video debunking, like, Samir Khan being a Muslim theocrat. But like I said, like, I'm trying to make the reasons why I do a thoughts on, like, not drama related. Like, not, like, just drama related. Because, again, like, at that point, what's the point in, like, an actual... The point of thoughts on is supposed to be a more objective and actually critical analysis, I guess. So I guess the latter part really kind of goes out the window. Now, I'm not just saying that these are the only 10 that I won't do. There are probably other ones that I won't do that I just don't say for whatever reason. Like, I mean, because I've gotten people request me to do stuff that I'm just like, no. Like, I just don't have an interest. But if they're not mentioned in this video, I'm leaving it open to the fact that I might do them in the future. But these ones, I'm probably just not going to do a thoughts on them. Now, that's also not to say that I'm not going to do any video on them at all. Like, they could be included in other videos, I could mention them in other videos, but I won't be doing a thoughts on dedicated to each of these creators. With that out of the way, let's finally get into the list. Number 10. This is a broad category and not like an actual person. My friends. Basically any YouTuber that I'm in a somewhat close relationship with, whether it be people like Sunflower Socialist, Niall Elcom, Mr. Beat, I guess Alex Kawa, or any basically other type of creator that's like in a friendly-ish relationship with me, I guess. Simply put, too biased. I know the whole point of thoughts on is that I'm giving my thoughts on people, so there's of course going to be a lot of biases, but this one is just going to be like too much rose-colored glasses. Like, another example is when I did my video on Humanist Report, where it's basically like, oh yeah, he's pretty good. Like, it's like, that's really a boring that's a boring video. The thoughts on episodes that are more negative are the ones that get more views. That's how it works in the YouTube world. Bashing something gets you millions of views. Talking about anything in a positive manner is a bad thing. You get no views. The rose-colored glasses are probably going to affect a lot of things, especially in regards to controversy. Like, let's say there is a huge controversy surrounding a person that is considered an associate or a friend. Like, I can't really go in depth on a controversy because it's like, that would burn a bridge. Or I could give it a very objective analysis of their content, and they'll hate me. It's just like, it ain't really worth it, I guess. And another reason why is simply put, a lot of the creators that I know are smaller creators, so there really is no point in me giving like any actual analysis on them. A lot of us are still up-and-comers, and anything else, again, would probably just be drama. Like, I could like go in depth on a lot of other creators, but it's like, that would just be drama. There's no point. Plus, I've already done like my bridge burning episode, I guess. Number 9, part 2/retractions. Again, another broad category one, not really a particular person, but you know. I've done 2 episodes of thoughts ons that are essentially like part 2s. One was a compilation one where I covered all of the thoughts ons that I had done previously as an end of year segment, and the other one was an episode about Jimmy Dore. The latter one was only done because my thoughts on Jimmy Dore had changed so drastically that I had literally no option other than make a new episode. Like, my opinion on Jimmy Dore literally was night and day. Like, those 2 episodes are literally night and day. January 7th, 2019.
Now let's start off with the first thing. Do I like him or do I hate him? I freaking love Jimmy Dore.
September 7th, 2020.
Yeah, I don't feel that way anymore.
What a difference 1 year can make. So yeah, unless my opinion on them changes like completely, like literally like that, it really makes no sense to make a part 2. And even then, only if it is extreme praise. Like, I would feel more compelled to do one if I, like, praised a creator and then they turn out to be a bad person. Like, for example, with the Aaron Green stuff, and I removed all the stuff relating to Aaron Green in the videos. Well, except for the mention, but I removed the channel link and I said, like, in a comment or whatever, like, lol, friend's a strong word. And for example, one person that could potentially qualify for a second part might be Secular Talk, but honestly, I think I gave him a lot of shit in the episode that I did on him, even though I still consider myself a fan of him. Oh yeah, for anybody who didn't get the memo, I'm not longer a fan of Kyle Kalinske. The compilations, if I ever want to do them again, they'll be very infrequent. It's partially why I'm a lot more thorough now. Like, both of those reasons are kind of why I'm a lot more thorough in my episodes now. I kind of want to do an episode where I'm, like, one and done. Like, I don't need to go back to it. Now, onto the individuals, we have number 8, Nick Branagh. Simply put, he's not a pundit. At least not technically. He's supposed to be a person trying to start a whole fucking political party / movement. Meanwhile, my show is supposed to be about talking about people who, on their microphones making political videos. Now, technically, Nick Branagh already has a podcast, but at that point, it's essentially like covering a political party's newspaper. What's the point? Why not just talk about the party themselves? And on that point, I've covered their party a lot in its short lifespan, and depending on how certain things go, I will be covering them very much so in the future. And another point that I think you might make is, but his party is essentially a vehicle for podcasters, but technically it's not the same. And even at this point, it can't even qualify for another sub-series, which is basically thoughts on for political parties, because in order for that to work, you have to, at the very least, start off as, like, a good organization. But I can't even say, like, oh, the organization is good, but it's, like, kind of flawed. It's like, no, I don't believe that at all. The organization is garbage. Now, on to number 7. One that you probably did not expect or did expect. And I'll use the person that I made 2 Thoughts On episodes on to tell you who it is. Now, a fun fact about this episode is, while I was writing this, I actually realized that I did not make an episode on Alex Jones. Like, for some reason, I didn't think that I made an episode of Alex Jones, but I remember making an episode about Alex Jones. Like, I knew I didn't, but then I was like, wait, but I remember doing one, didn't I? And that's because I made a thumbnail for a potential Alex Jones episode at one point, but then something else happened, and then I was compelled to make a different episode and just canned the Alex Jones one. The reason why I'm not making an episode on Alex Jones is very simple. He is a right-wing conspiracy nut, nothing more. Like, there really is not much else to say. Like, I'm not going to debunk all of his conspiracy theories because they're all obvious BS. And I'm not even going to be one of those guys that's like, look, Alex Jones is objectively funny. You gotta admit. It's like, stop encouraging him. Like, stop. Like, yes, I laugh at Alex Jones, like, funny clips sometimes, but it's like, don't say that part. He's just gonna make more stuff. Stop. So, I don't think I'll be making a Thoughts on Alex Jones, especially considering he's just steadily just started disappearing. But I did have an interesting idea for an EPU files that might pique your interest. The times that Alex Jones was right. Now, I'm not one of those, because, like, I see this every time I see that, or, like, someone will be like, Alex Jones was right all along, or, like Alex Jones has been proven right and right again, but it's like, I actually did think about, like, maybe I will go and look through the Alex Jones conspiracies, and then figure out, like, what ones was he actually correct about, and by ones, I'm thinking that he was just right on one thing, which you might know, but you might not know. There was one thing where it was like Alex Jones said this thing about, like, how oh, all these like billionaires are going to this place with a giant owl statue, and everyone's like, you stupid idiot. But then he showed pictures of the area, and then a bunch of billionaires did say, yeah, we do go to this area with like a big owl statue, and then everyone's like, wait, what? But it's like, is that really even relevant or anything? Like, nobody really cares. Number 6, Richard Spencer. He has a ton of reasons why I won't make an episode on him. He's irrelevant, as he was more of a 2017 thing. Plus, he's a Nazi/fascist. Shocker, my thoughts on him are rather slim. He sucks, and he deserves to get socked in the face. I know we're still facing the repercussions of it, but Spencer's specific movement, the alt-right, is kind of over. We have its babies with QAnon, groypers, and other far-right sentiment, but those can be tackled on their own. And before you ask, Nick Fuentes is not on the list because he is sadly still relevant. When he has 2 Congress members and a former fucking president on speed dial, it's hard to just not put him on the table for potentially talking about. Only reason I haven't thus far is because of fears of harassment. But then again, am I really on the level to face a harassment campaign? Number 5, PragerU. PragerU is a classic for YouTube lefties to dunk on, and that is literally 100% the problem. Everybody has done PragerU because it's too easy. Plus, I think it's just because I'm a stickler, is I prefer to focus on people who are true blue new media. Not like Dennis, who has corporations basically funneling his AstroTurf campaign to become relevant online. It's why I have basically went radio silence on every single MSM pundit after I talked about Tucker Carlson. At that point, I basically covered all of the relevant ones that are worth discussing. And PragerU is essentially just old media trying to take over new media, and not even doing it really well. Number 4, Keffels. Keffels somehow became one of the most controversial lefties in the space. In fact, they are so controversial that I might hedge my bets in saying that she might be more controversial than Vosh. I was first introduced to her through her epic pwn ratios, which made me not interested in her at all. Because literally, that was literally all I saw. I would see, people, retweeting, Keffels saying, I sure would love to ratio Dennis Prager, or I would sure love to ratio Dave Rubin, or I would sure love to ratio blank. It's like, you're not even going to provide an argument. You're just going to say L plus, you're literally just going to say L plus ratio. You're going to do this, and then you're going to get millions of Twitter followers. Meanwhile, I'll sit there and be like, here is literally comparisons of the Medicare for All bills in both chambers, as some people are making the claim that supporting one bill means that you're not supporting the other, and that it's inferior. No, I guess all this hard work ain't going to be doing nothing, but whatever. But one thing this did was made her both extremely popular and controversial really fast. And her hate is literally all over the place. Some say that all the critiques on Keffels are transphobic. Others say she's deserving of every single level of criticism. Some say she's a liberal. Some say she's a tanky, for reasons both completely valid and not. In doing research for her in this video, I made the interesting discovery that she was a Communist Party of Canada candidate. Some say she platforms wrong people, like Keemstar, Shoeonhead. Some say she does bad things, like say the R slur. Some people say if she were a man that she wouldn't be facing any of these criticisms, which is not necessarily true considering Vosh faces a lot of these same criticisms. And now we're getting people on the left that are literally going around being like, we need to be extremely pro Keffels or anti Keffels. And it's like, meanwhile, I'm sitting there just I literally don't care about them. So I'm just going to wash my hands clean of the affair. Number 3, Chaya Raichik, also known as Libs of TikTok. Simply put, similar problem with PragerU. She's talked about relentlessly. And what more can I say about the transphobic, schistic terrorist that hasn't been said already? I literally got my 5 minutes of fame with Libs of TikTok when I pointed out that they were literally sharing a video of an occupied children's bathroom in an effort to stop grooming. It's like, you're doing it wrong, I guess. Number 2, stone toss / red panels. This one's a little bit depressing because I've actually kind of wanted to make a video on stone toss / red panels for a while. And while you could say it has something to do with his ideology, you know, being like a literal Nazi is kind of a turnoff. But really, the biggest problem is the fact that if I did a video on stone toss / red panels, I would basically just be copying Thought Slime's video on that same subject. And while stone toss has steadily gained a lot more fame on the internet, especially with certain things like the Amogus meme, but it would basically just be retreading that same ground. Like, the only reason that we even speculate that Red Panels, another Nazi comic artist, is Stone Toss is because Thought Slime made the case that they were the same person, and it was reasonable that, yeah, that's what was going to happen. I was going to do the same thing. I was going to make the thing like, it's interesting that this panel is very similar to this panel. There's really no other new ground I could tread. Plus, it wouldn't even be my first video talking about a far-right Nazi comic creator, as I've already done one on Antunes. And I mentioned Stone Toss in the episode. So, yeah. And all the way at number 1, the person that was 100% the catalyst of making this video, Infrared Haas. To be as blunt and straightforward as I can be, I do not take Haas seriously as a political pundit or thinker. His route of fame is literally to collect every fringe group like Pokemon cards and turn them into a fan base / cult. Communists, fascists, libertarians, incels, LaRouchites, dude bros, these are literally some of the furthest groups of people, and yet somehow he can merge them all into one. Well, actually, scratch that. Communists are the only ones that are removed from any of those people. Well, actually, okay, I guess communists and incels can overlap, but you know what I mean. And what's weird is somehow he is able to convince people that somehow fascist libertarians and LaRouchites equals communism. And there is literally no ifs, ands, or buts about fascism. I know that there might be, I keep saying this even though nobody is going to be there to say this, but to play devil's advocate, someone will probably go, like, but he's not a fascist. The dude literally is a fascist. He quotes fascists every single time. Like, every time he's doing like a debate or discussion, he quotes a fascist to explain his perspective. Like, I was literally rewatching the Dylan Burns Haas debate at like that event, and like he said, no, I was watching like the Vosh debunking, where it was like this person was like, he was like quoting this random person, and then Vosh is like, oh yeah, by the way, I just looked it up who this is. Look, he's a literal member of the Nazi Party. Like, this, and his group of fan base, his cult that surrounds him, they're just, him and them are just so fucking politically illiterate, it hurts. To the point where I literally cannot, in good faith, make fun of them, because I legitimately feel like I would be in a short bus pointing and laughing at people. And don't take my word for it, listen to Haas.
Well, you're just talking like a Mongoloid.
I don't give a fuck, I am a Mongoloid. In my heart, I'm a Mongoloid. That is what I am.
He said it, not me. Oh, while we're at it, that like fucking dude bro attitude that he has, like that macho man chauvinistic thing, where he like gets really close to me like that is annoying. I hate that. These are the guys who literally never leave high school. Like, this is literally high school mentality behavior. That is what a scrawny white boy thinks a man acts like. It's just so pathetic. Like, when Jackson Hinkle did it, it's like 10 times more. I don't even know if it's more pathetic when Haas does it or when, like, fucking Hinkle does it. Because when Hinkle does it, it's like we've seen him at his, like, it's like a scrawny, weak white boy. But, like, with Haas, it's like, at the very least, he, like, okay, we've seen him be scrawny and weak too because he's, like 4 foot something or something. I don't know. Like, he's, like, incredibly short. Like, all the people that he ever debates and talks about, like, where he's like, I'm the real man, you're a fake man. He's shorter than them, so ergo, he's more of a beta than them. And what is 10 times weirder is that Haas is literally like the absolute most brain dead smart person you could think of. Or like, I guess he's the walking definition of like a smart dumbass, because he says like all of these like big words, these big like words that you'll find in a dictionary and like a political science book. He'll say all this big stuff, but it still somehow come out completely stupid and brain dead. He's literally like a goddamn parrot. He could hear the words and say the words, but he has no idea what those words mean. Or I guess a more accurate notion would be like him being like an orangutan who could do sign language. He doesn't know what those mean. And like the best way to see that is like to see like his fucking justification to be like anti-communist but also pro-fascist, but then somehow claiming that he's the real anti-fascist. Like literally he'll get called out and be like, dude, you support Dugin, he literally supports fascism, and then you claiming that you're the anti-fascist. But he's like, oh no, you see what Dugin means by fascism, he actually means like, what are you talking about? And his brain dead mecha tanky army does that too. Like literally, it's like they'll love and support Huey Long. It's like Huey Long hated communism, but then they're like, oh, no. You see, in actuality, he really was a communist. It's like, why do we live in this world where for some reason people interpret things that are objectively wrong as correct? I absolutely wish that I could literally turn my brain off and then go into an alternate reality and just think like the sky is green or something. This is a reality they live in, where the communists are fascists, the fascists are communists, and somehow supporting like a literal fascist for president will turn America into the next Soviet Union. Haas is a literal joke, and I do not want to treat him as any sort of serious thinker. And if Haas actually responds to this, I would genuinely not be surprised, because he is such a he's such an attention-seeking, like, obvious, like, if he responded to me, that would be verifiable proof that he is a weakling. If I can get under his skin, that just shows how much of a beta he really is. Haas is one that I'm legitimately so, like, passionately against giving any attention to, that from this day forward, no, I'm not gonna mention him. I might mention the Mechatankies, I might mention people in his circle, but Haas himself will not be mentioned. Alright, so those are the 10 people that I won't make thoughts on episodes on. But you know who I am going to make a thoughts on episode on? Anna Kasparian. This one's been a while coming, but I will finally talk about Anna Kasparian because I realized that I have not talked about a lot of women on this show. And hopefully for the rest of 2023 that might change. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when a future video mine comes out. And for some more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.